Hey everybody, this is GGB. Unfortunately, no co-host Peppers today, and to be honest, I just she was asleep. I didn't feel like going and grab her, especially since I have work tomorrow. I'd like to record this really quickly. You know, I just like to talk about something for a little bit. I was just watching March Madness highlights on my phone, the buzzer beater to the past 10, 20 years. God, am I hyped for March Madness again? I forgot how much I missed it last year. Last year I cried once, and it was when March Madness was canceled. This year I've already cried once, but that was because my Saints lost, and I mean, God, okay, never mind. But it was the saddest thing I've experienced in a long time, knowing Drew Brees will never come back as a Saint. This was our last chance, and the fact that we didn't get Drew that second ring was absolutely heartbreaking to me as a Saints fan. But let's go over what happened yesterday. Unfortunately for me, I'm just going to give myself a half freaking point because it's not quite fair that I picked a game and then they canceled it in the middle of the day. Like, I can't account for that, guys. I think Richmond would have beaten St. Louis if they had actually played. And I don't know. I'm giving myself half a point. That's just we get 3.5 points. Like, I think that's fair. I don't know what you guys think, but I think it's fair for me to get half a point for that. So here we go. Saturday. Well, actually, let's talk about what happened in the Big Ten yesterday with Illinois upsetting Iowa, right? Iowa fell from the 2 spot to the 4 spot, which Wisconsin's thanking their lucky stars. Thank you, Illinois, if you're a Wisconsin fan. Illinois helped themselves, too. Moved up to the 3 spot instead of being in the 4 spot. Iowa, which was pretty much the team that a lot of people picked to win the Big Ten this year, is in 4th place. And it's like not even, they're not a bad team in 4th place. We're talking about a 12-4 team in 4th place. Like, the depth of the Big Ten this year is absolutely insane to me. All the way down to Indiana, you have all teams that I think should make the tournament. You have Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, Iowa, Ohio State, Purdue, Rutgers, Minnesota, Indiana. So now, once you get to Indiana, it's starting to become a little bit, I don't know if they'll make the tournament. Now, I think those 9 are 100%. I think we could get 10 in if one of these bottom ones, Maryland, Northwestern, Michigan State, Penn State, Nebraska, goes on a run. Now, let's be honest, Nebraska's not going to do anything. Michigan State could get their stuff together. I could see that happening. Michigan State getting their stuff together and going on a run in the tournament, in the Big Ten tournament. Northwestern has the talent there, so does Maryland. Penn State's a team that I actually think could do it. I think they can. Weirdly enough, I know as a Penn State fan, I'm probably a little bit biased, but I've seen some good things out of this team. Jamari Wheeler, each player has their own specific kind of role, and it's really interesting to watch because it depends on which game, what player's the best. Like, let's be honest, Iowa, every single time Luka Garza touches the court, he's the best player. But it's been weird watching the past few games. Sometimes it's Brockington who's the best player. Sometimes it's Myron Jones. Sometimes it's Hara. Sometimes it's Lundy. Last game was Lundy. So I think it's really interesting. Each of them have their specific roles. Lundy and Brockington are obviously the best offensive players. Myron Jones is their three-point shooter. Hara is the big man inside. Wheeler's mostly a defensive player, but his defense is so good that it turns into offense. So I think he leads the Big Ten in steals. He's a fantastic basketball player. But let's go over what games are today. I don't want to spend too much time on yesterday because, stuff. So tomorrow we have the SEC Big 12 matchup, right? So this is going to affect any standings outside of tiebreakers with overall conference, overall records. So let's go over them real quick. We have 11 o'clock, number 9, Alabama traveling to Oklahoma. 23, Oklahoma. 1 o'clock, we have Florida traveling to number 11, West Virginia. At 1 o'clock, we have number 10, Texas Tech traveling to LSU. At 1 o'clock, we have TCU traveling to number 12, Missouri. At 3 o'clock, we have Auburn traveling to number 2, Baylor. And at 5 o'clock, we have number 15, Kansas traveling to number 18, Tennessee. So those are the matchups we're looking at in the SEC and Big 12. So now, if we're honestly going to look at the SEC and the Big 12 for that matter, it's going to be interesting. I think it's an interesting matchup. I don't think it's not going to really affect standings that much, except for in the Big 12. I know for a fact it's going to affect Oklahoma State and Texas Tech are pretty huge matchups because they're tied, and the only reason they have that is based off of record, if you actually look at the Big 12 standings, Oklahoma State is ahead of Texas Tech just because of the out of conference record, the overall record. They sit 10-4 with Texas Tech at 11-5. Now, if Texas Tech was to win and Oklahoma State was to lose tomorrow, Texas Tech could pass them for the 6th spot. So, again, that's the only thing that's a huge standout to me. If you look at all the other teams that are tied, Auburn, Mississippi State, Mississippi State could overtake Auburn with an Auburn loss and a Mississippi State win. Although, never mind, that'd be exactly the same. So I don't know if Auburn and Mississippi State have played so far this year. Let me check real quick. I don't believe they have, but I don't see Mississippi State on their schedule so far. I don't think they've played them. I honestly think they have not, if I remember correctly. And I did. I don't think they have to play them in the future. On February 16th, Auburn will be playing Mississippi State. But as of right now, if Mississippi State was to win this game, Auburn was to lose it, they could have the same record. I don't know how the tiebreaker would go, though, considering they haven't played each other, you know? So, what about... So that's really all that it impacts in these other things. Like, the only other team that has the same over... Well, I guess it would have... No. Okay, so the only other ones that have the same conference record are Georgia and Texas A&M. And with 2-6 in conference records, but even if Georgia was to lose and Texas A&M was to win, Texas A&M couldn't take that spot. Same thing going on in LSU, Florida land. So not anything huge is going to happen. The only things that can really change is, if you're going to watch it, is Big 12, whether Oklahoma State and Texas Tech win. So that's the one thing to watch out for. So what are the other games that we have tomorrow? In other conferences? I'm glad you asked. We actually have two pretty Big East games, right? So in the Big East, you really have the top 5 teams will probably make the playoffs from this conference, as long as one team down below, like Providence, St. John's, Marquette, Butler, Georgetown, or DePaul, don't go on a run, right? And win the conference tournament. So there's a pretty big game at 2 o'clock. We have number 3, Villanova, traveling to Seton Hall. Now, Seton Hall just lost to Creighton this week. It was a heartbreaking loss because they honestly should have won that game if things had gone right for them in the last few minutes, right? So Seton Hall with a win moves to 7-4. They could pass a team like UConn with a win. Now, a Villanova loss would be huge. I don't think that lets Creighton take over quite yet, especially with a Creighton loss if they were to lose to DePaul. Now, DePaul, that would be a pretty big win for them. They can move out of last place into second to last place. Now, if you're Georgetown, obviously you become a huge fan of Creighton in this game. So, weirdly enough, if Seton Hall was to win this one and Creighton was to lose it, again, they can't move up to the 2 spot. But I find it likely. I don't remember the percentages quite off the top of my head. I still believe Villanova stays in the 1 spot, though. But Seton Hall can pass UConn with a win, so that's the huge part of winning. Even with a loss, I don't see you falling below a team like Xavier. So take that with a grain of salt, if you will. I don't think Seton Hall isn't a huge game, but nothing to lose, but a lot to gain here. ACC basketball has some pretty interesting... actually, let's go Big Ten first. Big Ten, we have two pretty big matchups today. We have number 14 Wisconsin traveling to Penn State, and we have number 21 Minnesota traveling to Purdue. Purdue's actually favored in that game if you look at it. So, I'm sure you're wondering, how does this affect the Big Ten if each thing works out differently? So, let's say Wisconsin was to beat Penn State. They moved to 8-3. They hold on to the 2 spot. Penn State would fall to 2-7. Again, they would stay in the 13th spot. But if Penn State was to pull off the huge upset, which it would be a pretty big upset, but Penn State has been playing extremely well, so it's not unconceivable. Penn State would move to 3-6, which would hop them above a team like Michigan State, Northwestern, and Maryland, which would be if the season ended after today. If they were to win that game, they wouldn't have to play the first weekend, which is pretty huge, especially considering that Maryland, Northwestern, and Michigan State might be playing that weekend. I wouldn't want to play any of those teams first weekend because they're all kind of terrifying. They can beat you. They can beat you. It's possible. Minnesota's playing Purdue. So, sure, what would happen with a Purdue win? Now, Purdue, when they moved to 7-4 in conference, and again, would not move. They wouldn't move at all because of where they're sitting. It wouldn't affect anything if they were to lose. The same thing for Minnesota. If they are to win this game, they move to 5-5, which puts them nowhere. They don't move at all. They're already sitting in 8th place. Again, a 500. Actually, wait, never mind. With a 500 record, they can pass. They can pass Rutgers for 7th place. Because I thought it was 6-5 Rutgers conference record, but it is in fact a 5-6 conference record for Rutgers. So, with a win, Minnesota can move into 7th place, which is pretty huge. Top of the Big Ten. It's a very prestigious place to be if you're Minnesota. Minnesota already has a win against Iowa and Michigan on their resume. A win against Purdue would also be a pretty nice win, especially considering how good Purdue is this year. And I think they're an underrated team that for some reason is not ranked. I don't understand it. They're a very good basketball team. They deserve to be top 25. What happens with a Purdue win and a Minnesota loss, right? If Purdue was to win this game, they move to 7-4. Again, can't move. No matter what, Purdue's not moving out of this 6th spot, right? Ohio State doesn't play today, so take that out of your head. They can't lose, and you can't pass them that way. Even if Wisconsin was to lose, right? They'd fall to 7-4. They'd still be ahead of you just based purely off of conference record. There is absolutely no impact on Purdue whether they win or lose, other than just keeping them neck and neck with a team like Ohio State, Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, and it seems like Michigan's going to run away with this just because they don't play basketball anymore. Now, if Minnesota was to lose, they fall to 4-6, which would drop them below Indiana, so they'd fall from 8 to 9. Again, it's interesting. I think Minnesota definitely has a shot to win this game, but I think it's going to be a very close game because of the way Purdue's playing. Now, what else, you might be asking, is going on in the NCAA outside of SEC, Big 12, and Big 10 in the Big East? Well, we actually have 2 other conferences with ranked teams, so let's get into them. We have 2 pretty big ACC games that I'd like to go over. At 3 o'clock, we have number 16 Florida State traveling to Georgia Tech. Florida State's favored by 4.5 points. And then also, about 2 hours later, we'll have number 8 Virginia traveling to number 20 Virginia Tech. Now, this is a huge day because the top 3 teams in the ACC are playing today. So, again, big day of ACC basketball. So, I'm sure you're wondering, what would happen if Florida State was to be upset by the Yellow Jackets? Now, if Georgia Tech was to upset the Florida State, they'd move to 4-3 in conference, 8-5 overall, which would make them move up 2 spots, which would put them from where they're sitting now in 9th place up 2. Wait, they're not in 10th place, I'm pretty sure. Wait, no, 3, 6, 9. No, they're in 9th place. I'm sorry, I did the math correctly the first time. 9th place, they can move up to 7th place, right behind Pitt, right? Now, on the other hand, if you're Florida State, falling to 6-2 would be not great. You move to 10-3 overall. You'd still stay ahead of a team like Virginia Tech, mainly off of just pure conference record. Now, if you were Florida State, this is a prime opportunity. If you were to win this game, you move to 7-1, which would be huge if Virginia Tech is able to pull off the upset. Unfortunately, Virginia Tech, the highest they can go today, they just can stay in the 3 spot. They can't really get any higher. Actually, that's not true. With a loss, Virginia Tech, no, never mind. No, they can't get any higher. Sorry, Virginia Tech, you have to stay in the 3 spot. But ideally, you don't want to fall any lower. Although, if you lose this game, even if you do lose it, you stay in the 3 spot. So it's not going to impact Virginia Tech much at all. But it could help Florida State a lot. And it would give Virginia Tech only 1 game behind a team like Virginia. Or if Florida State was to lose and Virginia Tech was to win against Virginia, right, it would just put, you have Virginia at 7-1, you'd have Florida State at 6-2, and you'd have Virginia Tech at 7-2. Wait, never mind. If Virginia Tech is to win this game and Florida State was to lose, right, Virginia Tech would move up to the 2 spot, which would be pretty huge. Virginia Tech can get second place in the ACC with a win. So pretty important day of college basketball in the ACC. Pac-12 basketball, one pretty big game. We have number 23 UCLA at 6 o'clock hosting Oregon State. Now, again, not anything's going to change at all. With a UCLA loss, they still sit 8-2 in conference, with USC being the second place team at 7-2 in conference, right? If Oregon State was to win, they move to 5-4, still behind Arizona, which sits at 6-4. If they were to lose that game, they fall to 4-5, which is still better than Utah's 3-6. And again, if UCLA wins, they're going to stay in first place regardless, right? So not anything huge is going to happen in the Pac-12 today. Now, WCC, Western Coast Conference, and this is a game that's probably not going to likely result in an upset, with number 1 Gonzaga traveling to Pepperdine, but Pepperdine kept it close for about a half last time. Let's see if they can put together a full game. With a win, which is the likely scenario here, Gonzaga sits at 8-0, and again, even with a loss to Gonzaga, they still sit 7-1 and still will be top of the conference. Now, Pepperdine, on the other hand, with a win, could move to 4-2 in conference and can move past Santa Clara, which sits at 3-2 in conference. BYU can't move past them, even though they have the same record, but it would give them only a tiebreaker away. So you could take the lead with a game won and a BYU loss, right? So Pepperdine, you can hop up from that 4 spot to the 2 spot, which is about as high as you can really expect to go if you are Pepperdine. But what game does GGB think has the best chance of being an upset today? And I'm going to be honest with you. I think it's going to be, wait for it, I think Purdue with Minnesota. Now, I think Purdue's a better, very good basketball team. Now, I understand that they're not a ranked basketball team, but they're one of the weird teams that I think should be. I think they're a very good basketball team. I think they have a great shot at pulling off the upset here, right? Plus, on top of that, Minnesota, they normally have trouble with teams that they should deal with. Teams like they're a weird team to follow if you've been watching them this year. They have problems with teams they probably shouldn't have, right? But they also beat teams they probably shouldn't have. So I think Minnesota's one of those up and down teams. They're not very consistent, and I think that could bite them in the butt here with Purdue. Hey everybody, this is GGB saying adios amigos, and go Boilermakers.